Good afternoon and welcome to the May edition of the Thousand Oaks Council on Aging. We have a very busy agenda today, so let's begin. Commissioner Silverberg, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Francine, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Borghi?
Here.
Commissioner Fotheringham?
Here.
Commissioner Grimm?
Present.
Commissioner Loomis?
Present.
Commissioner Norkin?
Here.
Commissioner Poprock is absent. Chair Seardon?
Here.
Commissioner Silverberg?
Here.
And Commissioner Shentis?
Here.
Thank you.
It's time for public comments, and our first speaker is Don Phillips from the Conejo Valley Association of Realtors. Don?
Of an upcoming forum.
The mic just went on, so you want to start over. I'm sorry.
I forgot what I said. Hey, Jim, how are you? Nice seeing you again. Great to be here. Thank you. I just wanted to make an announcement. I'm a director for the Conejo Valley Association of Realtors, and we just had a forum April 16th in the same room here in the boardroom. 2009 Conejo Valley Housing Opportunities. It was a very great forum. If you go on to TV 10, you'll see some ongoing schedules for that for the balance of the month as well as the year. We do have another forum coming up in the same room here Thursday, May 21st at 7 p.m. And it's the next phase of a discussion on real estate fraud. There's a lot of fraud that's going on in this economy, in this environment. We talked about it last year. It's even worse now. And some of the things that happened last time, it's expanding into credit issues, naturally home ownership issues and everything else. The title of this is With Changing Times Comes Changing Fraud. We'll have the district attorney's office represented here. Bank of America will be here, as well as real estate agents. And if you have a chance to be here live, we'd love to have you on May 21st, and it will be shown on TOTV live the balance of the month as well as the balance of the year.
What time is it again?
It's 7 p.m., Jim. It is here in the boardroom. A lot of unsavory things happening, unsavory characters out there taking advantage of people in these very difficult times, and it's be a very informational forum, a lot of information shared. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Norkin. It's time for our first guest speaker, but I believe that would be me. No, I'm sorry. Harry, would you go ahead and introduce our first speaker?
Thank you, Jim. I will. In the effort to educate voters on the 6 budget-related propositions on the May 19th special election ballot, it would try to be explained by Dr. Herbert Gooch, Assistant Professor of Political Science at California Lutheran University. Special elections don't have a big voter turnout, therefore every vote could mean the difference between a budgeting process reform or potential new taxes on business to fill the gap in a budget. We're going to present a question and answer type program with David Marin as the questioner and Dr. Gooch as the answerer. And I don't have a bio on David. I'll let David introduce himself. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Mr. Norkin. Thank you to the council. I'm David Marin. I happen to be a member of the League of Women Voters. And the format Dr. Gooch and I are going to go through here is simply an interview process. This is going to be presented in an unbiased manner. We want to give you as much information about these 6 ballot propositions. And as Mr. Norkin said, our guest is Dr. Herbert Gooch. He is the director of the Masters in Public Policy and Administration program at California Lutheran University. Dr. Gooch, why don't we begin with the basic question, why are we having another special election?
We're having an election not because the politicians couldn't make a decision, but because the decisions that they made were flawed as they might be, also relied on tapping sources of income and doing some things that were put into the Constitution by proposition and or initiative, and therefore to change or undo those, you have to go back to the people. So it's not a case that the politicians, no matter what else you think of them, didn't do their job. They couldn't do the whole job because to a certain extent their hands were tied. Behind this is the fact that our budget is, and the system behind it is highly flawed, and it's resulted in multi-year deficits and a situation which, even without the economic, I won't call it collapse, but severe downturn from last fall, we would have been in trouble anyway. We were running what are called structural deficits, but the downturn in the economy has brought things to a crisis. The result was the governor called the legislature into 99 days of an emergency session. In late February, they finally came out with a broker deal. The terms of the deal were basically to fill a budget hole estimated for this fiscal year and next at $42 billion. Now, mind you, to put it in perspective, the general fund last year the total revenue was only about $98 billion. So $42 billion hole is just this side of catastrophic. The deal that was cut was a set of compromises in which there would be spending cuts or to the tune of about $15 billion. There would also be, for the next 2 years ongoing, a set of tax increases. In sales tax, an extra 1% from 8 to 9%. In vehicle registration fees, doubling the quarter percent to 1.12%. And thirdly, also putting a surcharge of 0.25% on all California personal income taxes. If you do the math, that doesn't add up to 42. So how do you fill in the rest of that? Well, part of it was through additional borrowing, which they had the authority to do, plus they counted on a certain amount, around $8 billion, stimulus money from the federal government, but they were still short. So they looked around for a way to fill in the last roughly $6 billion. The result is the 6 propositions that are before us.
Well, thank you. Herb, why don't we start with Proposition 1A? From what I've seen on TV, this seems to be getting much of the publicity, and it's the heavyweight in a way. So how about a summary of what 1A deals with?
1A does 3 things. First, it limits state spending by changing the budget process, and there's a lot of small detail that I'll try not to go into very much. I'll just give you the broad brush strokes. Second, it enlarges what is sometimes referred to as the rainy day fund. It's a reserve fund. Many of you have been in business, you know what a reserve fund is. It doesn't create one. We already have one. There was a proposition in 2004 from Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that created a 3% reserve or reserve fund or rainy day fund. This enlarges it to 12.5% of the budget. Thirdly, it increases taxes for a 2-year period. The sales income and vehicle registration fees that I have just mentioned. That would raise roughly in a 2-year period about $16 billion. So it's really doing 2 things. It's revising the way business is done so that it makes it harder to have spending increases. Second, it enlarges this rainy day fund. And third, it increases taxes. So what it offered was a little bit of everything and just enough to get most of the players to the table and the others not to leave. It was the result of a lot of hard bargaining over 99 days, and no one was very happy. And when they came up with this, you'll notice that the Republicans fought a tax increase, but were willing to do it only if there were these increase in the rainy day fund and that there were limits on state spending. It's often said this is a cap, which implies no more spending. That's not true. It just makes it more difficult to increase spending. What the Democrats got was they were loath to have a spending cap in recognition of the fact that California, for instance, is a state that is grain. There are going to be fewer taxes but more services needed. And people, in looking at this, many have come to the conclusion, let's be very careful if we just arbitrarily try to limit things, because we've got a population mix and an economic mix so that we may need more flexibility. Well, Democrats were only, well, let me just summarize without going into too much detail. Think sausage. You don't want to watch how it's made, right? And what happened here was a lot of very, very hard bargaining in which, as we'll discover, I'm sure, in the next few minutes, all sorts of sides, unions, Chamber of Commerce, all sorts of groups, in fact, including the parties, are split over.
So what I'm hearing from you, Herb, is that Proposition 1A is a series of trade-offs. On one hand, it extends taxes for 2 more years, but on the other hand, it increases the rainy day fund. And voters sort of have to decide which things they like better, or maybe hold their nose and vote one way or the other. You mentioned who's supporting this and who's opposing it. How about running down some of those names? I know even within teachers there's a split.
Well, one of the most interesting aspects of this is that it's linked to Proposition 1B. And 1B is something that the major teachers union, the sort of 800-pound gorilla when it comes to strong, well-organized groups in Sacramento, what they wanted. They wanted to get a lot of money they feel is owed them because education has been, often, well, if you look at the state budget of what's called the general fund, the amount of discretionary funds in theory available in any given year, about half of that, or 50% of it, is K through 12 plus higher education. So anytime you talk about limiting state spending, roughly 50% of it is automatically going to have to come out of education. And education feels in the past it had been robbed. So in order to ensure that the largest teachers union would back this, a deal was cut. If this goes through, right, and then it enables, or actually has the funding mechanism to enable Prop 1B to go through, which basically says the first $9.3 billion that comes into the rainy day fund will then in turn be spent automatically and only on education.
Herb, we were asking about also who's supporting and opposing this. I recall that the taxpayers are even divided. The Howard Jarvis group is opposed, yet Joel Fox, also well known as a tax fighter, is supporting this. Where do they stand and why? And how about the governor? Where does he stand?
Well, let's start with the governor. The governor is very much in favor of this. One might ask, why haven't you seen him? Because he's not very popular. If he gets out and supports it, some have said that would be a kiss of death. He's very much in favor of this, a very strong advocate, but you just haven't seen him out much. The Chamber of Commerce, for instance, for the state is in favor, and many business groups, but then a great many business groups are against. Those who often are in favor not because they think this is such a great deal. They're worried about, well, what would happen if it doesn't go through? Then the state's going to have to increase probably taxes. It certainly would have to cut spending. In particular, many local groups, chambers of commerce, for instance, are opposed to it because they believe that the state would probably make a run at the portion of the property taxes that now go to counties and city governments. So there's really all sorts of different groups are opposed and for it. With the teachers themselves, you find the CTA, the biggest teachers union, is in favor of it, but the other teachers unions are opposed. Public employment unions, one of the biggest, the SEIU, is opposed. So you're finding the unions fighting one another.
And Herb, last question on 1A. You pointed out that if this doesn't pass, there'll be some serious consequences. Will those serious consequences be for this year's budget, or does 1A only affect budgets in future years?
It basically affects the budgets coming down. the way. Those tax increases would basically allow between 1 and 2 year additional tax increases after the 2 years that have already been agreed that there would be tax increases. So those would really hit in 2011, fiscal 2011 and 2013. However, the setting up of the rainy day fund would start to go into effect immediately.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to 1B. You touched on this earlier, that it's linked to 1A. How about a summary of what 1B really does?
1B basically says that there's a priority of spending, that as money fills into that cup, which you could think of as the rainy day fund, the certain level of spending by priority of that money has to be spent on education until $9.3 billion is paid to education. So after that, there are still some priorities, but for instance, revenue bonds and others are not given a top priority. Education's put at the very, very top. So what this is basically doing is making sure that education gets well in excess of $9 billion. The exact figure of $9.3 billion, though, is in contention because this relates to what is often thought of as, well, that's money that the state owed education and should have paid it under a Proposition 98 back from 1990, which guaranteed a certain amount of spending would only go to schools. But then various calculations are made as to how much that should be. There are actually 3 different tests in determining the exact amount. There's widespread disagreement. Probably if this goes through, the exact amount would go to the courts to determine. It's basically 3 what are called maintenance guarantee tests, and you don't want me to go into it.
Well, Herb, I'll point out for the audience that the official voter information guide contains the details, the ugly details on all of these propositions. But I notice on 1B that there are no arguments submitted opposing this. Does that mean that most of the statewide organizations support 1B?
There were some, let me just say that the rumors are there were a number of deals made. It's as important to get somebody to supporting and therefore donating as simply not opposing. And several of the unions were simply, well, let's just put it this way, were spoken to, and it doesn't mean, let me put it this way, those unions that were very opposed would rather put their money into knocking off 1A, because that's the mechanism that enables 1B to go into effect. If you attack 1B, it sounds like you're attacking schools. Why do that? If you don't like it, attack 1A. So that's what this is all about, why there are no opposing arguments.
I never realized so many deals had to take place to make sausage. So, Herb, does that mean if 1B passes but 1A fails, then nothing takes effect?
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to 1C. This is called the California State Lottery Modernization Act. It seems like this one also has some trade-offs. How about the summary on 1C?
1C is also, the reason we're back at it is because of a prior proposition in 1984, Prop 37 at that point, in which the people of California were told if you vote for a lottery, we'll set it up in a certain way so it won't be sin, don't worry. But if you have any conscience, about that, don't worry, because what it'll do is it'll solve our education problems, because all profits will be devoted to education. So the way it was set up was that, indeed, there's a state lottery. It specifies you can't farm that out to Las Vegas or anybody else. The state alone operates it, and what they do is they have set it up so that 50% of the proceeds go to prizes. Another 16, up to 16% can go to operate the lottery, and the other roughly 34% is to be reserved to spending for education. Well, in fact, no more than 2% of the education costs have been filled in by this lottery. It never was what it was promised it would solve our education problems. That was to get it going. Several people have pointed out that California's lottery, relative to many other states, has underperformed on, say, for instance, the amount of money spent per citizen. I think the lead in the nation is Massachusetts, and followed by New York. So the idea here is that the modernization part of this, two things, modernization and then borrowing $5 billion. The modernization, the idea is that we ought to allow this to be restructured so that as much money as you want can be given to prizes and even to the operating fund, but that the current amount of money made, which is about $1.1 billion from the lottery, that money wouldn't go to education, but an amount equal to it, at a minimum, would come from the general fund and would go to education. So in theory, there'd be no loss of the amount that would go to education. Of course, depends on if the general fund has the money to fulfill its promise. The meat of this, though, that's the modernization. The meat of this, though, is that the politicians looked around and they said, my God, we need cash. Where can we get cash? Why don't we take that future stream of revenue from the lottery and simply sell it in the form of bonds? In other words, it's called securitization. It's really just borrowing. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll sell the rights to the future revenue stream for money up front. We figure, or the legislative analyst figures, that we could make probably about $5 billion by selling off the future stream of revenue. That means we could sell off future rights, but gain $6 or $5 million that could go to fill the budget holes now. Not a bad idea, except that our bonds are doing so poorly. We're actually rated below Louisiana, not even having a Katrina. So one wonders how much we would have, how much, A, whether we'd be able to sell the $5 billion worth, and B, we're going to have to offer a very high interest rates. Current thinking is between $350 and $380 billion of interest we would have to pay for about 20 to 30 years to pay off those bonds. The attraction is you can get $5 billion up front, and we have a crushing problem.
So to summarize, here we are again with trade-offs. On one hand, the original law passed by voters limited prizes to only 50%, but under Proposition 1C, the limit would be raised, so perhaps those who were buying lottery tickets would perhaps profit much more. On the other hand, we are going to sell that future revenue stream, get $5 billion now, but pay back about $350 million for, the next 20 years or something? So ultimately pay back a lot. So again, voters have to decide, do they fill the budget hole now with this $5 billion, or is this somewhat irresponsible, as one of the opponents says, to do a one-time fix for what's really a structural deficit? So there's really trade-offs. Have I missed anything?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. There are those that doubt that simply increasing the prizes, given the fact California has so many alternative entertaining and gambling, enterprises, one wonders whether we would be able to do that well. And it does seem to be very telling that the Indian tribes that own the gambling casinos are not worried about it.
And that's because this Modernization Act won't allow any new types of games like slot machines or anything.
Yes, there was a
like
trade-off to them, but they're not really worried about the competition anyway.
So more deal-making in Sacramento. Okay. Well, Dr. Gooch, let's move on to Proposition 1D. This is another one that, as you pointed out in your opening remarks, because voters passed it initially, the legislature has to go back to voters to make changes. How about a summary of 1D?
What 1D does is it responds to a proposition back in November of '98 that was spearheaded by Rob Reiner of All in the Family Meathead. Rob Reiner, the idea was that we would find a dedicated source of money and then have that spent only on programs primarily directed to children in the first 5 years of their lives. So it's called First Five. The idea here was the dedicated source of income would be 50 cents on each pack of cigarettes. Well, it's been fairly successful. It's focused on children and families programs. And in fact, it's been responsible enough to build up a reserve. Well, remember, to cash to a politician is red meat. Oh boy, we've got cash over there. So what this does is two things. It temporarily redirects. That, in plain English, means it takes the reserves this year, which are from the first five, which are about $340 million, and it takes this year and for the next 5 years $268 million out of the first five programs. It noticed the language. I mean, theoretically, if next year we came into the chips, we could pay that back. It's only a temporary redirect. Yeah. Rob Reiner, of course, is leading the opposition against it. Many local groups are not pleased because it doesn't kill the programs, it just starves them to death. It's a kind of vampire, right? And maybe they'll reinfuse the blood later, but we don't know. But that's basically it. Over a 5-year period with a $340 million reserve taken this year, and then a stream for 5 years of 268, that's about $1.6 billion.
So, Dr. Gooch, who are some of the supporters and opponents? And let's find out where the governor stands on this one, too.
Well, the governor is in favor of it. Many groups are, especially government groups, are tending to support this. Most public interest groups, though, are opposed, and all the groups, including a very, very large number of educational groups dealing with children, are adamant in opposition. It's a situation where things are kind of divided. Those who are in favor of it all go, gee, I'm not really in favor of it, but it's better than the alternative. If we don't get the money here, where are we going to get the money? So nobody's out there saying, kill first five. They're just saying, temporarily redirect its lifeline.
So, Dr. Gooch, to summarize what you're saying, then this is another example where the legislature was trying to fill a huge budget hole. They saw red meat, as you described it, in the funds going every year to First Five, and said, why don't we take that, and perhaps that saves some other programs being cut. But on the other hand, that money that goes to First Five feeds into counties and existing programs. So what do the counties feel about 1D?
Counties tend to be somewhat divided. The issue being that if you don't raise the money there, they're going to probably come after the counties. But there is another issue here that many people at the county and local levels are attuned to. That is that the money that is spent in the first five programs is actually spent by the counties, who each have a commission at the local level, 58 of those, plus a commission at the statewide level. Well, 80% of the money is spent at the local level by the counties. And so they're looking at this and saying, hey, we don't like this. We don't like this at all. You're underfunding, you're taking money away at the local level where we have to look at families and children every day. So by and large, I mean, I've heard arguments on both sides. The arguments in favor of taking the money by county officials I've spoken to are all simply apologetic. Well, Herb, it's a matter of priorities, and I wish we didn't have to do it. But I'm talking to a lot of other people that are outraged. They feel that a program that's working well and innovatively at the local level is now being completely undercut.
So for voters, a few years ago, they went to the polls and they voted to dedicate this tobacco tax to go strictly to children 0 to 5. And as you described, the programs are working well. Voters may like that. On the other hand, the trade-off is that we have a budget deficit, and every bit of money helps, and so voters have to pick their poison with this one. Very difficult decision. Herb, let's move on to Proposition 1E, which deals with the transfer of mental health funds. I guess in Sacramento language, that's temporarily redirecting.
Yeah, here the language altered, and it's called a temporary allocation rather than a redirection. Same story, though. Looking around, where can they get a hold of some cash? They The problem here is that it's being spent here. The program that is directed at mental health services was grew out of a Proposition 63 back in 2004. What that was a dedicated source of income was linked to a priority of a specific set of programs to be developed, and the money only spent on those. The source was to be a 1% surcharge on those with incomes over $1 million. Where it was to be spent was for only basically mental health services, therefore to be spent for the most part at the local level, and more innovative types of programs, mostly directed to people in the streets, people not being covered adequately by Medi-Cal, and a set of programs were developed. It's worked out fairly well, so it's showing a cash surplus. And so what happened was, well, we need money, let's go get it from them. So what this would be a temporary reallocation of the funding. That is, it doesn't kill all the funding, it just takes $230 million a year for the next 2 years. And then presumably the programs, some would be cut now, but not completely killed. And then when we're flush in 2 years, everything could be paid back and we'll be doing just fine. I should say that the kind of the odd and ironic point about this is that this program in 2004 was spearheaded by then Assemblyman, now State Senator Darrell Steinberg. And Steinberg was the lead negotiator for the Democrats in the budget deal in February. So this was his baby, and he's now, if you look at the pros and cons, he's leading the arguments that says, I hate to do it, and it's only a temporary allocation, but let's take the money.
Well, it's a bit of irony there. Dr. Gooch, I want to make sure I understand. You've said that if the state is flush in a couple of years, they could pay back this amount, but there is no obligation, is there, to pay back the amount?
No.
And then what would happen if the state said, boy, we sort of got comfortable getting this mental health money or First Five money. We don't really want to stop the temporary redirection. Could they continue it, or would they be required to come back to the voters?
This would only authorize 2 years. They'd have to come back and get another authorization to keep taking the money.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd like to ask you a philosophical question because we have just a couple of minutes here. In a sense, voters went to the polls and said, we see a problem. There's not enough going to mental health or not enough going to children. We're going to identify a revenue stream to pay for that, because in California we've had many budget or ballot box budgeting items where we say we want to incarcerate more people or do this, but there's no money to pay for it. This one actually identified the money. It seems to be well run, even built up a reserve. Voters, I guess, have to say, throw that all out because we're in such trouble in Sacramento, or do voters get to have both? I mean, what's the underlying reason why only these programs are going to be attacked?
Well, I think you've set it up correctly. They have been successful, and they're a victim of their own success. Right? And the real point is they're successful and they're filling a need, but what about alternative needs? Other needs take priority, so sorry. I mean, there is an underlying message that if these go down, that I hope, does not, come through. And that is that if you're fiscally, spending-wise, responsible enough to actually identify where you're going to get the money, that you get punished. I hope that's not the message that comes through. And yet to some people, from a philosophical point of view, that's what they're going to read about this.
So, as we've discussed on the last three propositions, these are really the meat of generating money for this year's budget. The lottery one generated about $5 billion, and then these two seem to generate about another $500 million to $1 billion. If all of these fail, we still have our legislators to go back and try to find $6 billion.
Yeah, our problem is we're then left with a $6 billion budget hole. And so they're going to have to go back and renegotiate. Since February, the Legislative Analyst Office, nonpartisan in Sacramento, has come out and said, oops, the economy is doing so badly, we're another $8 billion in debt. right? And so you would have to add the $6 billion to the $8 billion that is already, we think we're already in debt. So, they're going to be back negotiating anyway.
Really some trade-offs here for the voters to consider. Let's talk about the final ballot proposition. This is 1F, and it's titled about pay raises for state officials. What's the summary on this one?
Well, it's the one that has the best chance to pass, and is also the most meaningless. What it basically provides is if you run a budget deficit in a given year, that the following year, you nasty politicians can't get a raise. Of course, if it balances the year after that, you could double a raise. But it makes people feel good. I mean, I have a hard time seeing that any politician that has any moral integrity or any negotiating skills would be frightened into making a deal because, a chance of a budget raise next year might not be there. I mean, it's really kind of meaningless. It's a feel-good, and so why is it there?
Yes.
Draw people to the polls and to vent some of the anger because people are quite rightly angry about all this.
So this was just the outlet for us to vent, essentially.
For the most part, and also to get a little higher turnout. I mean, you want to look at this and realize that statewide, you have these 6 propositions. That's all that's there. A few places like the city of Moore Park are filling a council seat, but in the city of Los Angeles has some stuff. But statewide, there's nothing here, and these are complex, hard to understand, and the result is that almost all political observers think this is going to be a very low turnout. In fact, the results may have already been determined by permanent absentee voters.
What do you mean by that?
Write-in voters. It has been possible for the last 2 weeks to already mail your ballot in. For the most part, those are the voters who are most stable and most likely to turn out. And if you have generally a low turnout, their portion of the vote will tend to be exaggerated. If the voting turnout is, say, maybe 30% turnout, I would imagine 60% of that will be absentee voters, which would have been voters voting early. Primarily older voters, by the way.
Of course, we hope they wait till we finish this program so we
Of
can
course.
educate them. I'm
Of
sure
course.
they are holding up for that.
Of course.
Dr. Gooch, how about putting that turnout percentage in perspective? What was the turnout in the historic election last November? That was a general presidential election.
You always get bigger turnout when you have statewide, and then when you have statewide and you have a national election, that pulls people in from all over the place. And last November, we had an extremely high turnout. Ventura County was about 78%, I believe.
Well, quite a difference. Dr. Gooch, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, I'll ask if there are any questions, and I can repeat those.
Go ahead.
Any questions from the audience?
Doctor, I'm curious where you get your information. Do you read the records? Do you spend time in Sacramento? How does that get down so you can collate and make these observations?
Both.
Dr. Gooch,
yeah.
could you repeat the question?
Well, David, if you want to.
All right, I'll repeat the question. The gentleman asked Dr. Gooch, how do you get your information? What are your sources?
My sources are both in Sacramento and locally, newspapers. I read several different blogs, or not blogs, but like the political information sheets. And the most important single source is the one I would recommend to you. Go online to the Legislative Analyst's Office, and you will find detailed arguments, pro and con, but you'll also find the research behind what is the budget doing. That's available. We have a wonderful system. Our problem, in a sense, is not that we don't have information. We have too much. But I would say of all the sources for me personally these days, I go back to the Legislative Analysts, LAO, Legislative Analyst's Office, State of California. It's excellent.
And I was worried you were getting the information from the supermarket stand tabloid, so that's good to hear. Are there other questions? sir.
How many years have how many years has the state run a deficit budget?
How many years has the state been running a deficit budget?
State has been running deficit budget solidly for the last, all throughout Arnold Schwarzenegger, but then you go back, Gray Davis seems to me was thrown out of office. I cannot honestly tell you off the top of my head the last time we did that we had a surplus or that we actually balanced.
But Dr. Gooch,
Do you remember any time?
No, and I'm sure there are, but we're going back quite a ways.
but Dr. Gooch, doesn't the state legally have to be in balance?
The state legally has to, in order to pass the budget, have the figures that promise it's going to be balanced. Whether it gets balanced is entirely another matter. And usually that's based on very rosy forecasts of what we're going to bring in. And then there's a lot of games played, things that are owed now, deferring debt. Oh, there's lots of games that are played.
All right. I guess we have time for one more question.
Yes, could you give us your observations as to what you think is going to happen if these do not pass?
The question is, if these propositions all fail, what are your expectations of what will happen in Sacramento?
Let me answer that by in two ways. First, tell you what the predictions are of all my fellow colleagues and what the polls are saying. And what they're saying fairly consistently is that 1F, the most meaningless, has a pretty good chance of passing and by a considerable margin. The others are all in deep trouble. And that's been consistently scored for the last month and a half, most recently by one of the best statewide organizations, the Field Poll. LA Times will give you one next week. I don't think the Star is doing its own polling. What they're showing is that the vote against is running about 60 to 70% against 1A through 1E. The big money in advertising is just now coming down the pike, and so you're going to see a lot of that. But generally, the thinking is that it's always harder to get a yes than a no. And if you're going to do it this late, 2 weeks before an election, you should be in the high 40s or preferably around 50% showing a favorable inclination to vote. Instead, it's in the 30s and 40s. 1C being in many ways in the bottom, polling about 30%. Right? But as I say, a lot of money has yet to be spent. Let's suppose that what happens is what the polls are now predicting, and that 1A through 1E don't pass. It immediately poses a $6 billion budget deficit. It doesn't mean you've undone the February tax increases and all the deals that were made there. Those remain in effect. The state, though, by law, has to present at least a credible argument that it can balance. So it immediately will probably cause Arnold Schwarzenegger to call another emergency session to start the negotiations, to force the Republicans and the Democrats to come together. And it's going to not be very pleasant. Meanwhile, how are they going to fill in the money? Well, part of it, and the papers are Sacramento and even the LA Times this morning, but this week have been surfacing that probably Arnold and the state legislature will have to go in and raid the property tax. The monies that are currently dispersed to state and local governments. The thinking in today's paper was maybe another $2 billion off the top. Well, that'll come out of fire and police and a lot of local services. We'll go back and try to issue more bonds. But the problem here is, who wants to hold California bonds? And as many of you well know from having been in business, it's pretty hard to bankrupt as long as you have cash. But the key for us is how are we going to get the cash if the banks won't lend it to us or we can't float the bonds? Or in floating the bonds, we have to pay exorbitant fees. Well, welcome to the world of politics, right? It's as Winston Churchill said, look, politics and democracy is the worst form of government, except that it beats the alternatives. Right? So these guys are going to go back to the drawing table. They're going to be there arguing back and forth. You can expect Arnold is going to start shooting hoops because he wants to go back to the federal government and say, let's play basketball. Please give us some more money. But it's a real difficulty. It may mean, as I say, a lot of public employment, fire, some early release of prisoners. The chances are some of that may happen anyway, even if we got the $6 billion, because we're already $8 billion beyond that in debt already.
Yeah, Doctor, I wondered if you might comment what the overall up or down will be for the senior population.
That's a very hard one to figure out. First five, obviously, is not going to affect, too directly the senior population. If you look at it, it's really a question more what money is going to be available overall for programs that affect seniors. Some programs will be hit, right? Those that help fund local organizations that are devoted to senior concerns. I think I'd be much more worried about if I was holding state bonds and things like that, and I'd be more worried about my state pensions. But that's kind of indirect. It's, in a sense, the overall health of the state is hurt very badly, and in particular those in education or in public employment or the first five programs. So it doesn't immediately, or how would I say, the brunt of these, if this fails, the brunt is not on the senior population. But we're all in this together, so obviously we're all going to get affected.
Okay. I've been asked to point out that the League of Women Voters, in conjunction with the City of Thousand Oaks, previously recorded Dr. Gooch on these propositions, and there'll be about another 9 replays of that on TOTV starting tonight at 9 p.m. and continuing on till Election Day, and I assume on toaks.org you can find the play schedule. Dr. Gooch, I'd like to thank you on behalf of League of Women Voters for coming and speaking today and the Council on Aging. And Mr. Chair, thank you very much for your time. And Mr. Norkin, I finished right at 45 minutes.
Very nice job, and thank you both.
I thank you both very much for coming.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is the owner and president of the Great Gentle Traditions I'll get this right, folks. Gentle Transitions of California. Greg Gunderson is the owner and president of Gentle Transitions, and his company is one of the very first senior relocation or corporations in the county. Gentle Transitions is a specialist in the art of senior relocation. The mission of this special service is to ease the moving process for seniors. So Greg holds a BA from Marquette and an MBA from Northwestern University. So Greg, welcome. It's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Searden. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oy. How about a little shifting gears from that conversation about government? I know I learned a few things, and I have on my calendar May 19th to vote. So I'm definitely going to be there, and I appreciated some of that. But I would think it'd be kind of fun to have a little change of pace. And I know while government issues affect seniors, another key issue affecting seniors is those contemplating making a move. And so I like to spend a few minutes and share some of those things. As someone who's worked with seniors as clients for more than 15 years, I'm always looking in the media for things about seniors. And not too long ago in the LA Times, on the front page of the Sunday paper, there was a story and the title was Newlyweds at Age 95. And it was a story of a couple just up the road here in Camarillo that had both been getting married, and they were both 95 plus. What I thought was really interesting about that article was that both of them, their first marriages, had lasted 60 plus years. which I thought was remarkable. And they're obviously living life to the fullest, and I think that's admirable. Have any of you been to the Hollywood Magic Castle down there on Franklin? Well, I was there not too long ago, and I picked up this set of playing cards, which is called Senior Moments. And you might be able to tell these cards are actually quite larger than normal. They're normal deck playing cards with the one exception that they have a lot of sayings on each card. I guess you can enjoy reading them as you're playing. And I thought I'd share a few of those with you. The first is, old age is anyone born 10 years before you. So you never get there. That's always someone else. Secondly, maybe some of you can relate to this as well. Being a senior is when you stop blaming your parents and start blaming your children. Occasionally there's kind of the pessimists in the group, and they kind of have this perspective. The more you complain, the longer God lets you live. So that's kind of an interesting balancing act on how much you want to complain. But I like the optimists, and their perspective is this. Age is strictly a case of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Now, my wife, who turned 50 just a couple months ago, believe me, her age mattered to her a lot. And hopefully we're getting past that. But actually, talking about my wife, when I woke up this morning at the crack of dawn, as usual, my wife was up and out of bed. And not only that, but up and out of bed and out of the house. And she's a runner. She's run the LA Marathon 4 or 5 times. I don't know how far she went today. And we even traveled to Washington, D.C., where she ran in the Marine Corps Marathon. And what I observe with each of these events is that she doesn't really look forward to them. And when she does the workouts, 4 miles, 8 miles, 12 miles, 16 miles, she doesn't really enjoy that either. And a couple times during the marathons themselves, she downright wanted to stop and didn't want to finish. But she has, in fact, finished every single one. The best part for her is when she was done. That's the part she liked, and that's when she started to feel good about it. And interestingly, the further it got away from the marathon itself, the better the whole idea got in her head. So why am I talking about running in marathons? I'm talking about that because moving is a lot like running. The best part is when it's done. And very few people, in fact, I have yet to come across anyone who enjoys moving of any age. And I have, on occasion, though, run into people who said, I'm really looking forward to my move. But I know what they really mean is I'm looking forward to already being moved and set up in my new place. And I think, as I said, moving is challenging for anyone of any age. But particularly for seniors, moving is even far more troublesome. And I'd like to share with you and get to my first slide here is what I call the 4 hurdles to a senior making a move. And these are 4 challenges that seniors face above and beyond what other people do when they're making a move. And so I'd like to share those with you. And our first hurdle is almost always when a senior moves, they're leaving a home after many, many, many years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years or more. In fact, I'm kind of curious to take a little survey in the group here, particularly of the council members. Can I have a show of hands, people who have been in their homes for less than 10 years? 3, 4, 5, less than 10 years. Okay, a few in our audience. How about from 10 to 20 years? A few. How about 20 to 30 years? Anyone more than 30 years? Okay. How long have you been in your home, sir? 37. Okay, he's been in his home for 37 years. So I don't need to tell you that leaving home after that length of time, or 15, 20 years, is more than just a physical change of place. It's an emotional experience. It's where the kids grew up, where family events took place. It's not uncommon for me to come across a client who would say, the only way I was ever going to leave my home, feet first. I had never actually planned to walk out of my house. So it's a big, big deal, leaving a home after that length of time. The second hurdle is almost always when seniors move, they're going from a larger place to a smaller one, which frankly requires making a decision about every personal possession in a house. Garden tools in the garage, clothes in the closets. I hear one of the council members commenting on the picture. China in the dining room, pots and pans in the kitchen, toiletries under the bathroom. And for most people, this aspect alone is enough to put off making a move because they don't even know where to begin with dealing with the accumulation of things they have. The third hurdle, almost always when seniors move, they're facing some kind of health issues. And I'm not talking about the serious things. I'm talking about the easy stuff. Maybe the back doesn't work like it used to. Maybe our stamina now isn't what it was last time we made a move. That makes it challenging for seniors. And the fourth hurdle for seniors when making a move is limited availability of family to help with a move. And nowadays, family is not across the street or across town. They're across the state, across the country, across the world. Or if they are here and local, they're usually busy with dual careers, getting kids off to soccer, and the pace of life as we know today. So that makes it challenging for seniors as well. And in fact, moving is one of life's most difficult experiences, along with loss of a spouse, divorce, job change, and of course moving. And because of that, we wanted to spend a few minutes with you today and really get to the objectives for our seminar presentation with you today. And the first is to identify the moving challenges. And frankly, I've already done that, talking about the 4 challenges that seniors face when making a move. The second thing I want you to leave with us today is if you're contemplating a move, you're not alone. Many people have run that marathon or made that move and actually felt a lot better after they did. And it is actually doable. And there's a lot of other people who are in the same boat as they're thinking of making a move. The third thing I'd like to do today is let you know that there is actually moving assistance to help older people when making a move. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then the final objective for today is I want to play a little game with the council here and others in our audience, which to test your own downsizing IQ. And I brought some things along and we'll have a little fun with that here in just a minute. But as I mentioned, moving is a challenge today, and there's actually people and companies responding to that challenge. And there's actually now a new industry, which is called senior move management, responding to that need. So what is senior move management? Senior move management is a profession dedicated to assisting older adults and their families through all aspects of the moving process. And actually in 2001, my company and myself was part of a group that founded an association of people that are focused on senior move management across the country. And that association is called NASM. What is NASM? It's the National Association of Senior Move Managers, which mission is to ease the relocation process for seniors and their families. As I mentioned, I was part of a group of about 12 companies that founded the organization in 2001. Currently in the country, there are more than 400 companies doing this in almost every state. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about what senior move managers do in our services. The first aspect for senior move management is helping with a floor plan. And many of our clients are challenged by what things to bring to the new place, what won't I bring. And a senior move management company like ourselves would help and sit down with the client to talk about what's practical, what's sentimental, what's both, what's neither. Can we take the living room sofa, or maybe should we take the love seat from the den? Can we bring the 6-foot by 3-foot desk from the office, or might we have to deal with a secretary desk instead? So that's a big part of senior move management services. Secondly, a big part of senior move management is dealing with the downsizing process and helping our clients ahead of time to go through closets, cupboards, cabinets, and looking through all the items in a home to make decisions about what to move and what not to move. Oftentimes our clients, when working with us, will comment, we've done more with you in the last 2 hours than we've done on our own in 6 months. And we can't pretend to make decisions for our clients, only they can do that. But by facilitating that process, we can really help make the process move along much better. A big part of the next aspect of our service, the next aspect of our service is making arrangements for items that are not moving. A lot of times a client will know exactly what they want to bring to the new place, and they get the whole downsizing thing, but they're challenged by all the things they can't bring, and what are they going to do with it? Can it be an estate sale, eBay? How do I ship a China set to my daughter in Texas? All of those kinds of things. And while most senior move management companies don't do estate sales, they absolutely get involved with making arrangements for those kinds of things and for the things not moving. The next aspect of our services is helping with utility changes. And you'd be surprised how many of our clients today don't really care about the phone getting set up in the new place, but they want that internet connected. And you know how it is a challenge to deal with utilities and calling them on the phone and so on. And that's a big part of our service to help seniors as well. As it gets closer to the move, most senior move management companies, including our own, would do all the packing necessary for the move, usually the day before the move takes place. But our clients would sleep in their bed just like they would any other day. Just happens to be some boxes in the house. And then on moving day, we'll meet the moving company. Most senior move management companies, in fact, are not movers. There's lots of movers in the yellow pages. Companies like ours usually engage traditional moving companies in the local area to make a move, usually moving companies that we are well aware of and work with on a regular basis. So on the day of the moving company will come pick up the furniture and boxes, bring it to the new place. And one of our favorite aspects of the service is be there on moving day to completely unpack and resettle the new place. And it's our mission on the day of the move to completely unpack the boxes, make the beds, hang the pictures, plug in the TV, connect the phone, get the family pictures on the dresser, medicine in the medicine cabinet, entirely and completely set up that new home that day. And we have a nice slide here. Imagine moving day looking like this. And this, in fact, is a home, how it looked the day on moving day at the end of the day. Everything's in place. And it may not be the home of the last 37 years as this gentleman here, but all the things that make it home are there and are set up. And our feeling, another slide here, on moving day, our feeling is if a new home can be settled in that very same day, our clients will find the adjustment process to the new place much, much better. Many of our clients move to retirement communities, and in those cases they find that the food tastes better, the van is easier, the people are nicer. Just colors the whole experience in a much, much better light. One of my favorite slides here, and I always see the council members reacting to it, is a picture on Inauguration Day. And who is that, gentlemen? It's the vice president, the former vice president, on Inauguration Day here in January. He's in a wheelchair on Inauguration Day. Does anybody know why that is? Because he helped move some boxes when he was moving out of the vice president's house, and he strained his back. And so on Inauguration Day, he's in a wheelchair there in the White House. So we like to think our slogan for senior move managers, he's now our poster child. And we understand with our clients and the senior population that most of our clients, they want to do everything themselves. And we get that. And we, in fact, have a lot of respect for that. But at the same time, sometimes it might be a little wiser to leave some things to others and provide a service. I did bring a cartoon with me. Might be a little hard for those in the room here to see, but it's a picture here of a house, a couple standing at the front sidewalk, and the yard is littered with furniture, all kinds of paraphernalia. And the comment that goes with the cartoon is, "There's more inside." So now I'd like to get to our game. And really my favorite part of our presentation, my presentation, is a game I call Dealing with Downsizing. And it's your chance at home or here in the room as well, is to test your own knowledge and find out your own downsizing IQ. And the object of the game is not to get a full house. Because if you do get a full house, it may be like the photo here. It may be like a house of cards and come tumbling down. And the way the game works, in our system, works like a stoplight. And when we look at items in a home, we use little colored stickers to mark what moves and what doesn't. And we're going to do that here in the room today. And the stickers work like a stoplight. Green is for go, things to move. They would go to a new place. Red is for stop, things that don't. And yellow is things we can't decide about and we'll come back to later. So though council members here, there aren't any yellow cards, so you're going to have to be decisive today. No weaseling out here. And what I've done is I've collected a number of items from clients' homes or from my own home. And I'm going to show them to the group here in the room today. And I want you to look at the item. I'll tell you a little bit about the item. And then I want your opinion by holding up your cards, whether you think it's a good thing to take to a new, smaller place or maybe not. If you think it's good to bring to the new place, if you'd hold up your green cards so we can see for move. And if not, if you'd hold up your red cards for things to stay. Are we ready to play the game? So our first item today is this green marble cylinder. We'll leave it at that. If you think this would be something good to bring to the new place, please hold up your green cards for us to see. Or if you think maybe not, hold up your red cards. And I see mostly red cards with two exceptions. And we have a question.
Is that little round cylinder something that my great-grandmother gave me on her dying?
Oh, an excellent question.
Yeah.
Mr. Sheeran is asking if this little cylinder is something that his great-grandmother gave to someone. The answer is no, it's not.
Okay.
I saw the two gentlemen next to you were saying they wanted to bring this to the new place.
It looks like something my wife wants.
And the gentleman said he thinks it's something his wife would like to bring to the new place.
Probably bought it.
Does anyone know what this is?
Pencil holder.
Pencil holder,
It's a wine night.
a wine cooler. It is, in fact, a wine cooler. Now, many people think it is a pencil holder. It would be great for kitchen utensils. Would be good for that. Some people think it's a vase, but it is, in fact, a wine cooler. And that brings us to our first downsizing tip of the day, downsizing tip number 41, which is if you don't know what something is, it doesn't move to the new place. And the story behind this actually is that it came out of my own home. And it was up in a cupboard over the fridge. I have a council member has an important question.
When in doubt, leave it out.
When in doubt, leave it out. We'll have to write that down. That's very good. It'll be on the next PowerPoint slide.
Okay.
Suggestion.
This actually came from my own kitchen in that cupboard that everyone has over the fridge. And I was up there rummaging around for a salad bowl, a punch bowl, something, and I came across this. And I had no earthly clue what it was. And if I was sorting through a home and I had no earthly clue what it was, I would leave it behind. Because if I don't know what it is, I'm not about to use it anytime soon. Which brings us to the first point here, and the next is, if you forgot you had something, it doesn't move either. All right? So you got the idea? Well, let's do a few more.
Okay.
Now, I see most of our councilmen here are gentlemen, but we do have some ladies in the audience. And so, gentlemen, if you would think of a lady friend, spouse, or otherwise, on these next couple items, I have a nice pair of white ladies' shoes. Would this be something to bring to the new place? Could I see your cards? Most of the gentlemen are saying no. Some of the audience members are saying yes. What would be a good reason to bring this to the new place? Oh, and this gentleman thinks that this reminded him of his wife's wedding shoes. So sentimental value, I might have something to that. In most cases, my vote on these shoes would be no. And why would that be?
They're out of
High
style.
heels.
Oh, high heels. No good for
High
seniors
heels.
out there.
Most of my clients aren't wearing high heels at all.
Right.
And if they do very rarely. So I would probably say no on the high-heeled shoes.
Fall prevention.
I have another pair of shoes.
Ooh, they're nice.
Oh, the gentlemen are liking these. Dress shoes. These are dress shoes. Well, I don't think they're dress shoes.
No, but
My vote on these shoes is yes. And why is that?
Utilitarian.
yeah, utilitarian.
They're utilitarian. They're really good everyday shoes. So I vote yes for these. So that brings us to our next downsizing tip. Downsizing tip number 30. Bring what you really use and or wear and leave behind what you don't.
I hope
Okay.
my wife is watching.
No, that's not your closet. All right, let's move to the kitchen. I have a really nice pot here for all of you to see. Would this be something to bring to a new place?
Does it have a lid?
Does it have a lid, a cover? I see lid lovers in the audience. Actually, I lost the lid.
Oh,
But let's assume it does have a lid. Would this be good to bring to the new place?
Lots of fun.
Most answers are yes. And I agree, I confirm, let's bring this to the new place. And why do we want to bring it to the new place?
Look, use it.
Brings us to downsizing tip number 9. Bring items that are the right size
Right side.
for the new place. And if I'm moving to a smaller place, I may not be entertaining, and that big spaghetti bowl and the punch bowl and those things can stay behind, but this is a perfect size for 1 or 2 or for a small family. So I like to bring this to the new place. Staying in the kitchen, and I like to run with me a little bit here. Assume you like coffee and assume you like cream in your coffee. I have a jar of Cremora non-dairy creamer.
Too old.
Would this be something for the new place?
What's the date?
I see mostly no's. I have a couple of questions about the date, and this actually came from Borden, and there's no date on here from Borden.
Oh, that's all.
But you know what?
Borden's out of it, yeah.
I did get this from a woman in Woodland Hills, and she did put her own date on here. It's December 19th, 1982.
Oh, gee.
This had been in her pantry for 25 plus years. So we left it behind, and it wound up in my presentations because she's not about to use it anytime soon. All right, now, it's kind of hard for me to bring furniture. So I didn't bring any furniture, but instead I brought a cartoon. And if you take a look at the picture, it looks like it's moving day. The gentleman is in his nice easy chair, looking very relaxed. And the wife, it looks like she's paying the movers. She's really not. What she's saying to the movers, here's $20. Make sure the plaid chair never gets there. So this is a good example of when spouses haven't worked out what will really go to the new place ahead of time. And one of the spouses has resorted to drastic actions, drastic measures on moving day. Hopefully you're not doing that, and hopefully you're doing some preparation beforehand. But when it does come to furniture, like to downsizing tip number 22, I have a couple of thoughts to share. First is we encourage our clients to avoid furniture shopping. Now, some of our clients say, we're moving to a new place, by golly, we're going to get some new stuff, and more power to you if you want to do that. But more typically, our clients' to-do list, when they're moving after leaving home after 20, 30 years, their to-do list is gigantic. And furniture shopping is not easy. You can never find the right color, the right upholstery, the right style, the right price, the right time frame. So typically we encourage our clients to avoid furniture shopping, and in fact to utilize the house full of furniture you do have. A lot of times furniture can be used in different ways. Is a great way as well, rather than going out and do furniture shopping. Now, one of the handouts we have here in the room, and is also available in the Senior Center, is a page we call 30-Day Moving Calendar. And it's our attempt to share with you and others the things we've learned along the way. And you know how when you finish a project, and you say, if I only knew when I started what I know now, how I would be better off. Well, this is our small attempt to share some of those ideas with people contemplating a move. And in fact, I'd like to share just a few of them that are on the page today. And that brings us to downsizing tip number 53, which is do easy and obvious areas first. Now, I know when I do homework with my daughter, I like to have her do all the hard stuff first and let her do the coloring and those things later in the evening, because she always seems to have enough energy to do that. But when my clients are sorting through their home, or if you're contemplating sorting through a home, I want you to do all the easy stuff first. In fact, the two pictures on the slide, if we can go back to the slide, is kind of an interesting contrast. One is a living room, and another is a stack of papers. Now, which area would you like to start if you were going to begin sorting in your home? Council? They're not quite sure. I heard the living room, and absolutely I vote for the living room. And the reason that is that we could probably look through a living room and in a very short time decide what things are moving to the new place and not. But if you started with that stack of papers, you'd be 2 inches through the stack. It would be 2 hours later, and you're saying there's no way I can get through the rest of my house. So we suggest to you and to our clients, do easy and obvious areas first. Next downsizing tip, number 11. Use colored dots, stickers, or Post-it notes to identify items in the house that move or items that do not. Now, on occasion, I'll come across a client and I'll walk in and they'll have a legal pad with 20 pages of inventoried things, every single item in the house. But we like to use little colored stickers to mark, coordinated with our stoplight approach. Post-it notes work really well too. And we actually take these little stickers and put it on a corner of a piece of furniture, put it on a lamp, put it on a cupboard, put it on a shelf. And it helps you remember what decisions you've made. It also is really great when the kids come over or they come down from the Bay Area or come up from San Diego. And you can say everything with a red dot is going to charity unless you take it this weekend. So it's a real nice process to help everybody know what's moving and what's not. Next, downsizing tip number 3. Be happy to downsize a little at a time. And even with our clients, just 2 or 3 hours is as much as most people can do at one moment, even for younger people as well. So we suggest be happy to do a little bit at a time. And then downsizing tip number 44. Decide first whether you want something or not, then later decide what to do with unwanted items. And what we're trying to get at here, I recollect back to college when I took economics, and the professors are always talking about isolating the variable. And what I see my clients do is they're not isolating the variable, they're considering all kinds of variables all at the same time. So maybe if it's talking about a wine cooler, or let's say this is a vase, and they're asking, do I want this in the new place? Or, maybe Mary wants it, or how much will it get in the sale? And asking all those questions all at the same time. And if that was me, smoke's coming out of my ears. So what I suggest to you and to my clients is first decide, do I really want this wine cooler or vase, whatever it is? If not, then later figure out where it's going. And that will make the process easier for you as well. Now I have a few more items here in my collection. Now, it's almost getting to be summertime, and I know people are thinking of spring, but I have a nice little snowman here. Would this be something to bring to the new place? The gentlemen here are saying no. I see a lot of Scrooges, except for the chair. Chair Sheridan saying yes. And actually, I agree with Mr. Sheridan. He says it's adorable. No, I wouldn't quite say it's adorable. In fact, I've had people that have thought it's not very cute at all. It's not even handmade either. The reason I say yes is this came from my own parents' home. And yes, we had 12 boxes of Christmas things that went to the sale, but there were a few special ones that I wanted. And while he's not particularly cute or handmade or a gift, my mother put this in our den every year for Christmas. So because I had that sentimental connection, I pulled this out for my dad's apartment or for me, which brings us to our next downsizing tip. Downsizing tip number 23. A sentimental reason to keep something is every bit as valid as a practical one. And it's these sentimental things, to coin a cliche, that make our house a home. And these are the kinds of things that make your home special, and these are the things that we want to bring to your new place as well. So we want you to bring those things that make you feel comfortable in your home. Okay? Now. Books. Anyone have books at home? I see a few hands here in the audience. I have here Amy Vanderbilt's new complete book of etiquette. I see no one needs brush up on your etiquette. And I hear, it's a classic. Well, my vote for the book is no. And I have a few comments about it, though. And brings us to downsizing tip number 35. When it comes to books, books actually are sentimental items. And in my view, in the same category as collectibles, family photos, and travel memorabilia. And when it comes to sentimental things, including books, brings me to our next bullet point there, which is you can bring as many as you like, provided you have adequate space for them. And we definitely have clients that have literally thousands of books. And if they really want them and we have space for them, we bring them. But more often than not, we say, we have these bookshelves, and we can bring as many as will fit on those shelves. And we work out with the client which ones are their most favorite. And what many of our clients find is that they think they're going to really miss those things that they decide to discard. But when I see them afterwards, they actually say, I don't miss those things at all. In fact, I might have even have brought less. And actually, many of our clients find themselves feeling liberated by the things, not having the weight of the stuff they've had. So they're really surprised by that experience. Okay? We haven't gone to the closet yet. Although we did see some shoes earlier. I have a really nice sweater here. Would this be something good to bring to the new place?
It looks like you just bought it, so it obviously has.
I look like it. In fact, my vote for this is no.
Oh.
And the ladies here to my left have noticed that it in fact has
Yeah.
a price tag,
I know.
and as the gentlemen here have noticed, therefore it's never been worn, and is not about to be worn anytime soon. So my vote for the sweater is no. And the gentleman has a comment.
I think you have to be careful on this one. It depends on whether it's a female item or a male item. And who bought it? Yeah, be careful.
So the story behind this, and all items do have stories, is it came from my own closet. It was a gift by I have no idea who. And I've never worn this because I think I look fat in these kinds of sweaters, or fatter depending on your perspective. And in fact, that's a key reason why people, men or women, don't wear the clothes they have, is because they don't think they look attractive in them. And we know, getting to our next slide, downsizing tip number 10, is that most people only wear about 20% of the clothes in their closet on a regular basis. So we try to work out with our clients which items those are. And let me share a few tips about that. 2 easy ways to start going through your clothes is things that are no longer the right size. And a lot of us have gotten larger over time, and some of us have gotten smaller. But things that are no longer the right size for whatever reason are good things to discard. Another easy way to begin is duplicates. And I see a lot of gentlemen here, and I'll bet if we went into your closets, I bet in several of those closets we would find 8 light blue button-down shirts, 6 white ones, and 4 cream ones. And maybe instead of bringing 8 light blue button-down shirts, we might get away with 2. Or you ladies, a lot of times I see this in a closet, I call the rainbow of slacks. And there'll be the red ones, and then the cream ones, and then the pink ones, and then the orange and the green, all lined up by color, and having 3 or 4 of each color. Well, maybe we don't need 3 or 4 of each color, but maybe 1 or 2. So duplicates is a great way to begin going through clothes. Okay? Now, I talked earlier about saving the hard stuff for last. So this usually is kind of the hard stuff. I have an envelope here from a client I got not too long ago. It says 1966 tax records. 1 of 2 packs. Would this be something for the new place? No. We have a question, Mike? And the gentleman mentions consider shredding it, and that's actually a good thing to think about. So I have a couple thoughts to share about this. One is I'm often asked, well, what records do I need to keep and for how long? And my answer to that is, if we asked 5 CPAs, we probably get 7 different answers. So what I suggest to my clients, and I suggest to you, downsizing tip number 24, ask your own tax advisor which record you need to keep and for how long. They know your personal situation, your current home, a second home, businesses, stock transactions. They're the best person to ask that question, and so we suggest that. And as the gentleman mentioned here, shredding is an important topic, and we absolutely encourage shredding by our clients. We absolutely discourage using those little shredders from the office store that I see my clients, putting those things in one at a time. And then I see confetti all over the place, and the thing jams, and so on. So we often suggest to our clients to call up a shredding company. And it's easy to put out boxes in the garage or in the entryway of stuff you want shredded. In fact, some shredding companies will shred it right before your very eyes, or you can take it somewhere and watch it being shredded there. So we suggest that rather than using those single machines. Okay. Now I have just a couple items and then we'll be on. Do we have any Neil Diamond lovers in the audience? I have Neil Diamond, Love at the Greek. Would this be something for the new place? I don't see many cards. I hear the gentleman saying, get a CD. My vote for this typically is no. And when it comes to records, I have is what I call the record gauntlet, which is if you can answer yes to the following questions, then we can bring the record. Do you have a record player? Does it work? Do you have access to it? Have you played a record anytime recently? Ooh, that got a lot of them. And last one is, have you played this record lately?
Oh.
So in most cases, the records stay home or for the sale.
Well,
But
for your information,
yes, sir.
vinyls are making a big comeback.
Yes?
Really?
So the gentleman said vinyl is making a big comeback. In fact, I have a record player in my office, and I play a lot of my old records. But in most cases, my clients aren't playing the records at all, so we leave those behind. But actually, I brought this for a different reason, and that is that I actually had the opportunity to move Neil Diamond's mother, Rose Diamond. She lives in the San Fernando Valley, a very, very sweet woman. In fact, she was on American Idol not too long ago. And she had a picture that we came across just by accident. And I asked her if I could share the story about this with my presentations. I'm glad to share it with you today. Her son is Neil Diamond, so she has lots of neat pictures. Neil Diamond with Elizabeth Taylor and herself, another one with Michael Jackson. So lots of neat things like that. But we came across one picture that stopped both of us dead in our tracks. It was a picture of Neil Diamond dancing at a White House gala, this huge event in one of the ballrooms. And standing behind him is Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan. And that was really neat. The kicker was he was dancing with Princess Diana. So that photo stopped both of us with what we were doing. And I could tell she really cherished reliving that moment. And it was a very special moment for me as well. The reason I bring that up is that while many of us may not have pictures of our children with Princess Diana, we will, during the moving process, come across some family memorabilia. In fact, when I was moving my own father in Minnesota not too long ago, I came across 3 shoeboxes with letters that he wrote my grandfather during World War II. The boxes had never been opened in the last 50 plus years. And what was really interesting is that not only did I learn what my father did every week of the war, but I learned a whole lot about my grandfather who died before I was born. So during the move, and I talked about the marathon and so on with my wife, moving's not easy, but you are going to come across some kind of family history, some lost items, some jewelry, those kinds of things that will make it worthwhile. On occasion, you might come across some things that might make you laugh. And I was working with a client and came across this book. It's the official Jewish joke book. And I thought that was interesting. And then just by accident, I turned the book over and upside down, and on the back, it's the official Irish joke book. And if you can see, the pages are pretty yellowed. And so the books have been around a long time, and I've been through here trying to share some jokes with my groups, but actually none of them are decent. And so I really can't share them with you today. But I am, and I know the gentleman will like this too, I am going to go out on a limb and share with you this book, which is entitled Sex After 60. Now, I'm a guy, and I'm naturally interested. I got to see. I can't help myself. I got to open up the book. And so I did, and here's what I found. Whoa. Now, if any of you have friends overseas, you can share with them because it's been translated into 16 languages. Now, while this book may be empty, if we go to our next slide here, and the audience will look, I saw recently in a Costco parking lot this car in the handicap zone with a license plate that says Sexy Senior. So I think that's probably, while I'm not 60 yet, I'm hoping that that's the case more than this empty book. But that really brings us, the gentlemen are liking that. But that really brings us to the conclusion and really the whole point of this presentation, which is that it's true moving's not easy, and I'm not about to tell you that it is. But I am absolutely 100% going to tell you it is absolutely totally doable and workable. And much like with the wife and running her marathons, I have seen firsthand many people have made the move and said, if I only knew the move wasn't going to be so bad, I actually would have moved much earlier. And as you contemplate making a move sometime, in the coming months, coming years, or longer, as you think about making a move, it is doable and can be done. And hopefully I've shared some ideas here that if you are contemplating a move, might make you think that the light at the end of the tunnel is not so small. It's actually kind of big and gets brighter as you go along. Okay? All right. Any questions then?
The council's been looking at, the future of the council's been looking at the future of the senior community, the aging community, and one of the areas we've been looking at is what is the future of senior housing? Stay in your house, don't. And it's an evolving subject because in fact we're right on the cusp of changes, and we've got the pre-seniors now eventually moving into becoming seniors, and you look at that whole picture, and the question is, and plus new concepts called aging in place, maybe even home sharing, another type of thing. And we don't know really what's coming in the next 10 years. So how do you see, I have two questions. One is, how do you see the impact of what you're doing in these new, with the new concepts as they come along? How do they fit? My second question is, how do you coordinate or interface with the moving company?
Okay.
'Cause that's an experience in itself.
Yes. In our case with moving companies, as I mentioned, we're not a moving company,
Right.
but we work with moving companies on a regular basis, and we know them. In fact, we know most of their crews by first name and vice versa. And when we engage a moving company, they know that it's in their interest to do a good job for us because we're going to keep calling them rather than somebody calling them from the yellow pages. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, follow up, please. What fraction of your service what percentage of your service is part of the overall cost of the move?
The cost of I think what you're asking is the cost of the moving truck is probably about 30% of the cost of the entire relocation service. So if someone engages my company to help do a floor plan, go through closets, cupboards, work with family packing, unpacking, and then of course engages a moving company, which we arrange. Usually about 30% is the cost of the moving truck, and about 70% is the cost of our services with all the preparation and follow-up.
Doesn't that depend on the length of the move? If you're moving...
Oh, absolutely. Oh, well, certainly, yeah, certainly an out-of-state move, it would be greater. Moves vary in size on many things. How long people have been in their homes, how many things they have, how decisive they are. But let me get to your first question, which is actually kind of insightful. And we have the pleasure to serve much of California. But I know here in Thousand Oaks, you are blessed to have many different retirement community options. I'm not so well versed in senior apartments here in the local area, but I do know you have several retirement communities in the area. In fact, one in particular, University Village, that is really what I would call, you asked about where do I think this is going, which is really state of the art, where people can have all levels of care. In fact, where we've been involved with spouses that live on the property, where one lives in independent living and another lives with a considerable amount of care.
But having said that, it's not clear what fraction of the senior community can afford to move into the University Village model.
Right.
And then there's those of us and those who don't have long-term care. So there's a lot of issues there. So University Village may be the exception to the rule here.
Yeah, it's true that only about, I think it's less than 3% of the senior population actually lives in a retirement community of any type. Most people, as I'm sure most of you, prefer to live in your home until you go out feet first. So most people choose those options, and actually a really small part of the senior population actually live in retirement communities, assisted, independent, or whatever care.
Any other questions?
We have one here from the audience.
I get to use the microphone. Can you give me a range of fees, of your fees?
Absolutely. The question is, can we give a range for our fees? We charge on an hourly basis for what we do. Most moves, the average size move is probably about $2,500 for what we do, and a moving truck is $600 or $700. Of course, there's a wide range with that as well. I do want to share a couple thoughts about that. One is that many people have commented that the move could not have happened without your support during the move. And actually, a number of clients have commented to us that there could not have been a better use for our money than to have your help through the move. So we find that our clients are really pleased with the money they've spent and have found it very well spent.
Any other questions?
Quickie. No, I think that what you sort of alluded to it, but probably a good way to sell that your product is that, particularly the older the customer, the $2,500 or so is small compared to having a health problem or a, breaking a leg, fall, whatever. That's really the way it is. What's $2,500 against getting stuck and all that kind of stuff?
You're speaking to the choir here. So we absolutely believe that as well. And as you could saw, the vice president, he wound up on a wheelchair. So
just for everybody out there, services wise, can you piecemeal it, or you have to have a whole package, or just bits and pieces?
A good question.
Because maybe you got family that will help
Absolutely.
on a variety of things.
We're glad to do as much or as little as our clients like. And a lot of times we do have a lot of family involvement, and sometimes they do a lot of the sorting, sometimes we work side by side with them. So we're only interested to provide the services that people want, and that might be all of the things that we do, or it might be just parts of it. We're glad to do that, absolutely.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Greg.
for having us. Appreciate
Terrific
it.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our committee reports. Housing.
Yes. I'm sitting back there, and I have a small report here. Now that the stimulus package has been passed by the Congress and signed into law, what impact does it have on it for seniors, or in it for seniors? We know that one of the benefits to be received by seniors on Social Security is that each one of them will receive a stimulus check in the amount of $250 to be spent anywhere they want. So what else is in the package for seniors? The package increased the limits on reverse mortgages to $625,000, but only until the end of this year. But the implementation of this depends on HUD and the lenders. The package also contains $4 billion to preserve, repair, and improve public housing, with $1 billion specified for energy conservation. It also contains $259 million in grants or loans for HUD-assisted affordable housing, whereby improvements must extend affordability by retrofitting projects for green concepts. The package also supports two types of tax credits, one of which is a credit exchange whereby state agencies will exchange a portion of a 9% tax credit to the Treasury Department for 85 cents per tax credit dollar. This exchange program will provide some stimulus to generate between $2.5 to $5 billion in funding for improvement and repair. The bill also provides separate funding for HUD's home program to state housing finance agencies. There will also be tax credit for first-time home buyers. And talking with Doug Tapking of the Area Housing Agency, he said the stimulus funds will not add any Section 8 funds. They will only be used to go to rehabilitate public housing like the Florence Jantz units, and all of that will be spent on energy measures like double-pane windows. That's my report. Thank you.
Well, stay with it, Harry. We're up to programs and public information and then senior services directory. So,
I have no report. I think Francine might have some words on the services directory. Francine?
I understand we actually have some nominees at this point. Or not Senior
no.
of the Year, Senior Services Director. Yeah.
Yes, we're accepting, instead of, our cutoff was extended, we're accepting applications for the entries into the Senior Services Directories until May 31st. If
We have
anyone
a
is
cutoff
interested.
date.
May 31st, then. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, legislation.
Yes, I think we've had a very good discussion today with Dr. Gooch on the most important legislation facing us, and that's the upcoming election on the budget. I'd like to point out or remind people that we heard estimates today that in the last election that up to 80% of the voter population voted. In this election, I've heard estimates ranging from 10 to 20%, and I think it's useful to keep in mind that if you vote in an election with a low turnout like that, you're essentially getting 4 votes relative to what you got last fall. So it's maybe worth your effort if you've made a firm decision on the ballot.
Okay. Fraud.
Oh, identity theft has always been a big problem, which is always getting worse. And the stimulus package that Harry mentioned is another opportunity for the thieves to get at you. You're going to get, if you're on Social Security and retired, you're going to get a $250 payment at the end of May. So beware of the person who sends you an email or calls you on the phone, sends you a letter offering to help you get this money. And then he'll ask you in order for him to help you, he needs your Social Security number and your date of birth and a few other little things. Or he may just ask you for some money to cover his expenses. Either way, don't do it because you don't have to do it. In the letter that the Social Security people sent to you, they actually put in bold print and a big underline, you do not need to take any action to get this payment. It's going to come to you automatically. If you get your regular Social Security check in the mail, you will get the $250 check in the mail. If you get it deposited into your bank account, the $250 will be deposited into your bank account. Don't fall for any of these phone calls or emails. Just sit back and wait for the money to come in by itself.
Thank you, Marty. Senior of the Year. Gene?
Yes. I'd like to, first of all, just take a moment of your time today to thank the organizations who have nominated some of the more outstanding people in our community as candidates, nominees for the Senior of the Year. And I'd also like to encourage everybody to set aside June the 4th, which will be a wonderful evening together where we will introduce you all to the nominees, and the mayor will be there. We'll have dancing, we'll have a live band, we'll have food, and invite all of you to attend and get tickets, please, at the Senior Center. On June the 4th, the mayor will be there to announce then the winner and our Senior of the Year. Thank you.
Roughly how many nominations do we have, do you know?
I believe the number is 7.
Cool. Good. All right. Item G on our agenda is the Senior Adult Master Plan. I know we're going to have a meeting about that, but do you have anything you want to say at this point about SAMP?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'm pleased to say that in the past month, the Senior Adult Master Plan has made what I call a quantum leap towards the finish line. I don't have any details now, except to say that the Council on Aging and the city will be proud of this report, and it's a result of the work that everyone on the commission here has done. But even exceeding that, that's the first thing. The second thing is, and we say this all the time, but this time we really mean it, that our city staff, Francine Spriggle, really gave us the energy to make the quantum leap. And without it, we would not be here.
Amen to that. It's about time someone said something nice about Francine, don't you think?
Right on.
All right, moving on. Disaster and Emergency Preparedness, Leo?
Yeah, thank you very much. You caught me completely unaware there by my four key sentences out there in TV land. Wake up, everybody. All you have to do really to stay safe is one, wash your hands. Say again, wash your hands and don't put them up to your face. Make your evacuation plan in your emergency box. Santa Barbara's doing that this afternoon, and we've talked about it before. Please sign up for City Alert if you haven't. If you have a landline, it probably has already been included, but a lot of us don't depend on that landline for important information. We know it works. We had a wonderful incident a couple of weeks ago where a fellow wandered off from his facility. 2 hours after the alert went out, the city and the authorities had him back in protection. It's a great story. It just works so well. Sign up. And finally, your middle name needs to be dubious. It can be querulous. It can be I refuse. Do not open the door for anyone you don't know. Thank you.
We'll move on to our liaison reports. Mel, do you have anything from VCAAA?
Yeah, just briefly, there's kind of two things. One, that the strategic plan that's due to the state in May from the Area Agency on Aging has pretty much been completed. There was a hearing on it on on April the 21st, well attended by, in fact, many folks and caregivers in the from Thousand Oaks area. The comments were excellent also. And sort of mark your calendar. Sometime in October, it hasn't been set, there's going to be another senior summit sponsored by the Board of Supervisors of Ventura County. The work is, some of the work has just started in the back, in the background, and we will. We hope that the Thousand Oaks Council on Aging will be able to play an important role in that. Provide information. There's information going to be provided that we think will continue to help us in the planning that we do for for our senior community. Cool. So those are the two items.
Okay, thank you. Marty, do you have something from the Retired Senior Volunteer Program?
Yeah. Our SVP is recruiting volunteers to provide regular telephone calls to homebound seniors or people with disabilities who don't have any family or friends nearby who can check up on them. It only takes a few minutes of your time, and you will be given a training program to help you, and there'll be regular meetings so that you can discuss whatever problems you may have with particular calls that you make. Your time is flexible. It's a great opportunity because you can do it right from your home. All you need is a telephone and maybe 5 or 10 minutes of your time. So if you would like to volunteer for this service, let's see, RSVP's phone number is 381-2742. 381-2742.
Cool. Anything else? Andrea, what's going on at the Global Center?
Okay, I know you guys are counting down here time-wise. We've got our professors and pastries this month, so tonight is the first session for this particular month. And it stars Energy and Black Holes by Sean Kelly, so that one's going to be really, really interesting, and it's full, and people still keep calling. We have our Mix and Mingle. It's going to be Wednesday, May 13th, so next Wednesday at 1:30 to 3:30. And Thursday, May 14th, so next Thursday is Colette Vacations. It's going to present a travel slideshow, and they're going to feature New England fall foliage. So if any of you are looking back to getting back east or seeing some really good fall foliage, this might be the one to come and see. Our new singles group that's meeting in the evening has changed its name to Singles Unlimited and Get Ready to Mingle. So they're going to meet May 14th and 28th from 6 to 7:30, and anybody who's coming, they want to do a whole appetizer share and make some connections, do an email update list, and they're planning some out and about things. And May 28th, they will have a guest speaker discussing body talk. So it's about body language and whatnot. So they're doing some interesting things. May 16th, this is the biggie. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday is Generation Celebration at the Global Senior Adult Center. So we're going to have 40-plus booths. We are focusing on technology. So we do have several seminars that'll be talking about things and different gadgets to keep you in the house and make life easier, as well as having the Thousand Oaks Computer Club, Best Buy. We've got some CLU students, technology people, and some teens, so you can bring in your digital camera and your cell phone if you forget how to do something. Just like a gentleman today couldn't get into his contact list to call his daughter. He forgot how to do that. Yes, I'm sure it was his daughter. She was giving him a ride home. Shame on you. Or if you've got your laptop and there's maybe a new thing that you learned, but then you can't remember how to do it, or somebody keeps showing you something over and over, or it does something and you can't remember how to do it and you can't find your book, bring those in, because we're going to have a lot of different volunteers that can help you go through all your different stuff and see all the different technology that's out there. We'll also have some music. We have a Space Shuttle Cafe that'll be there, so you can get your coffee, your sodas, or snacks, and or your lunch throughout the day, and that's from 10 to 2. Now, we're going to have a real busy day because then the city right across the street over by the soccer fields from 8 to 3? Yep. 8 to 3. So if you've got stuff you want to recycle, like your old computers or your old cell phones, or you want to get rid of a bunch of trash or couches, all that kind of good stuff, you can bring your truck or your car or whatever, and you can pull in and go to the appropriate place, dump it off, and come over to our parking lot and have a good time and see all the different vendors and sponsor booths and speakers and Space Shuttle Cafe. So you can make a real fun day out of it. So we're 10 to 2 and they're 8 to 3. So those are the two biggies coming up in 2 weeks. Also, Wednesday, May 20th, we have Solutions for Seniors. So we'll have Marianne Knight and Betty Berry and Marilyn Knopp all there to discuss a variety of Medicare and housing issues. So if you want some information, definitely come to that. It's free, and they always have refreshments. And at the end, I'll give you the center's phone number because you do need to just call in for seating reservations. Then at the very end of the month, this is the coolest part, one of the coolest parts, Sunday, May 31st, we are having our Ms. Senior Conejo Valley preliminary pageant, which then feeds into the Ms. Senior USA. So, and Susan Cashman has been here a couple times talking about it, and she is totally full. I think we have 16 candidates now. So it's going to be a really, really fun day. So come and do that. We've got the tickets at the center. They're only $5. It does help a little bit to go back into their nonprofit organization to run it. And we've got community members that will be the judges, and I'll be there. So it'll be a really, really fun event, and it's a first-time thing. So if it goes off well, we'll be able to continue to grow it and do it from year to year. I know I've talked about it before, but we do have the Wii gaming system. And all you have to do is come in and ask if you already know how to play, or call and make sure you're there at the time that we do the instruction. It's picking up more and more and more. I've got a couple different ladies and some gentlemen that come in, and we've been having a lot of fun with it. I beat them all at boxing. So, and we have our teen versus seniors billiard tournament results. So, the tournament ended up being played at the end of last month, and there was a tie, and then the seniors' best player, Israel Gomez, played the tie-breaking against Chris Ayala for the championship, and Israel protected the plaque, and it stayed at the Global Senior Adult Center. So those are the things that are coming up, and for any information or anything that you might have forgotten, and I know I was talking fast so we can get done, it's 805-381-2888. 381-2744. So 381-2744, and you can talk to any staff person and get all this good information. Any questions?
This is on the website too, isn't it? The monthly information, isn't that on the website or accessible?
The City of Thousand Oaks does put our newsletter on the Thousand Oaks website, so www.toaks.org. Global Senior Adult Center will be up probably by end of June, I'm guessing, with our own website, in which you'll be able to get the newsletter and more off of there. So look forward to that when that breaks. But if it'll be just globalsenioradultcenter.org. So pretty generic. You'll be able to find it as long as you know the name of the center. Any other questions?
Thank you, Andrea.
Okay.
All right, we move on to Commissioner concerns. Very quickly, Mel, do you have something that you wanted to get?
Yeah, real quick. Thank you, Jim. I just want to acknowledge that May is Older Americans Month. And the reason why we're here at this council and other councils and so forth around the state and around the nation is because of Older Americans Month, the Older Americans Act that in fact has formed all these organizations. And I think it's also worthy to acknowledge and acclaim that we have a large number of dedicated volunteers throughout the community, throughout the county, who actually help make the lives of seniors much better. And so in honor of Older Americans Month, I would like to dedicate our statement on Older Americans Month to all of those volunteers and to all of the councils similar to the Council on Aging. And I'll just close with I should also mention an example of one of those volunteer groups that really counts is the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Group, which is supported by the Ventura County Area Agency on Aging plus others. And they have had, they were really on the line with budget. We were talking about, the propositions and budgets, and right now that's okay. That looks like that's going to work out. But the reason why that program works is because there's 50 dedicated volunteers. Finally, I'll close by saying that Margaret Mead once said that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other comments from our commissioners? I will sign off very quickly by wishing my son Jeff in Houston, Texas, who claims to be watching this on the net. I have only this to say to you, my darling son, go Lakers. We are adjourned.